Production funding for this program is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bard Cole for WKNO. This is A Conversation with Morgan Jon Fox. Morgan is a filmmaker from Memphis with a very interesting career. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Your first feature-length film, Blue Citrus Heart, screened at Indy Memphis 15 years ago. Since then, you've made more movies. You've worked on TV series. You made an award-winning documentary. You've done Taco Bell commercials. You've done film work for the Grizzlies. You've become an accomplished professional. And it all started with a movie that you described as a couple of kids figuring out how to run a video camera. So let's start off by talking about Blue Citrus Hearts.
Yeah, so, I never went to film school. And I'm not down on film school. I just didn't have the resources to figure it out. And so my film school really was working at Otherland's coffee shop during my late teens, early 20s, and using all that money to just slowly buy equipment and start shooting, having no idea what we were doing. We didn't have even computers when we first started shooting, so we were literally trying to edit like VHS to VHS. Like that was, luckily about a year into that is when the digital revolution happened, and so we got our iMac and we were just constantly shooting, me and a few friends, Eliza Tuzo, Josh Lorenzi, later on it'll be like Tim Morton, Andrew Ninninger, a bunch of Memphis folks who've gone on to do big, great things. And we just shot constantly and made a lot of experimental films. And it was all for me about leading up to eventually making this script that I had written. At the time it was called Shades of Blue. Not to be confused with Ira Sachs's film 40 Shades of Blue. And so I made a ton of experimental films. They were all really terrible, but Indy Memphis, the local film festival, was so gracious to screen them.
Well, we have a clip from Blue Citrus Hearts I want us to take a look at.
Sure.
I mean, it just amazes me when you talk about not being concerned with the visual level, at least not primarily, because I think your work is all so beautiful, and it's been, I mean, there are definite visual aspects to it that have been consistent from this first movie to the more recent things you've done.
It got to me too at first, but like I got comfortable enough. Like I used to not be able to go near the ledge, but now I can just like sit in the corner and write.
See, this is what I hate, those cracks when I step.
Well, maybe you shouldn't step on it then. I've never really been at the point in my life where like I wanted to kill myself, but if I was gonna do it, I think this would be the place.
What?
Like, I mean, just think about like, it'd be the most exhilarating way to die. If you jumped off. Yeah, it would. And it's like, have you ever jumped off a building? Do you know, like, what if you just, you might keep flying?
I don't think you'd really know me if I did.
Well, but see, that's the thing. What if you just kept flying? Maybe I do know you. Maybe that's how I know you.
Now the framing on those shots is so amazing to me. What you can't see draws you into the action of it. And it's sort of, I mean, it's neat.
Yeah, some people can't handle that kind of cinema where the camera's constantly moving. It gives them motion sickness, and I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
But we loved that kind of cinema back then, and so that's something that we really focused on. Myself and Susie Crash Course was what she went by at the time. She now goes by Eliza Tuzo. We would basically, it was a two-person crew. Mm-hmm. She would hold boom, I would shoot, and then we would swap off if we did 2 takes, and then she would do the other one, she would shoot it, and I would hold the boom. And that's basically how we handled every single scene. So I don't actually remember, like, in terms of the takes, like who did which one. I'm not sure, so can't really take credit for all of it.
So tell me a little bit what happened with this movie. It premiered at Indy Memphis.
It premiered at Indy Memphis in 2003, which was so cool to like just it be in front of an audience. As far as I was concerned, I thought I was proud of what we had done, but like that was the end game at that time. Mm-hmm. Like premiere Indy Memphis, let everyone involved in it see it, and the Memphis community see it. so lucky back then. John Bifus and Chris Harrington and Chris McCoy, all film writers, wrote about it, and that was like a huge thing for me, growing up reading their reviews and stuff. And so it premiered, and then we ended up winning the best hometowner film at the festival, which was cool. That was a huge honor, and it was so exciting. As far as I was concerned, like, that's enough for me, because I didn't understand what having a film career was like, or really understand how to attain those goals. But I did submit to like 30 other film festivals and spent a good amount of money for a working at a coffee shop on that budget. I mean, I think I spent like $800 on film festival submissions, and the first 29 of those I was rejected from, which was fine. It was fine. I was not upset about that at all, promise. But then literally the 30th one, I had almost forgotten that I'd submitted to. I just knew that I was getting rejected from all of them. And then suddenly I got an email one afternoon from the Chicago LGBT Film Fest. It's the second oldest film fest of its kind in the world. It's a huge festival. They premiere studio films there and all kind of stuff. And they said, not only have you been accepted to our festival, we want you to be the closing night feature film. And we'd love to fly like 4 to 6 of you, to crew and cast up to Chicago to be here for the premiere. And that was completely insane. For me at that time, never really traveled much anywhere, certainly never screened a film outside of Memphis. I literally thought I had like made it, like that this is my Hollywood calling, and that I had like broken through. And that was an incredible experience. And we went on to win Best Film at that festival as well. And it kind of launched the rest of the trajectory for that film. And we ended up screening at like 50 film festivals around the world. We won a handful of more Best of Film awards.
And then eventually they had your DVD at Blockbuster.
Yeah, to really date the film. Not that you haven't already, but yeah, Blockbuster carried it in all their U.S. stores, and then a distributor ended up picking it up, and it's still available now on Amazon Prime. It was available on Netflix for a while, and as the DVD market has sort of gone away, yeah, it's available for streaming. And
OMG Ha 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 was your next feature.
Yeah.
That was 2009?
Yeah, I actually made a film in between that I don't talk about a lot, but it's called A Way Awake. I really rushed into making that film. We had a larger crew, we had a tiny budget. I feel it was one of those like sophomore slump type of deals. I mean, I'm so proud of it because it's one of my children, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, I felt like it sort of failed in terms of what I wanted to accomplish in cinema at the time. I tried to do something sort of slick and sort of the opposite of what I did in Blue Citrus Hearts. And it got a distribution deal, and it's out there. You can also see that on Amazon, but you could go find that. We won't talk too much about it. But the next film I really like, I spent a lot more time developing and kind of got back to my style in terms of the way I approached content that I wanted to make was, yeah, OMG Ha Ha Ha.
That was sort of the moment that social media had just begun to be ubiquitous, and there's so many connections between, the structure of that film felt very of its time.
Yeah, so I collaborated really heavily with a good friend of mine named John Romer, and he had just started film school in New York, and kind of the way that we collaborated is that I told him, like, look, see things in New York that are interesting to you, interactions, whatever it might be, and send them back to me and I'll write a script out of it. And so we did that, and we shot in a concentrated amount of time, not over 2 years. We shot a film that we were going to call Heartstrings. That was our initial intention. And it was just a tone poem, really. Like, it didn't have a plot. It was just these moments that were kind of back to back and characters kind of weaving through. And then for some reason, I just didn't feel like it worked, and I wanted to push it a little bit more. And so that's when the structure and it being renamed OMG Ha 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 came in. And we created this character played by Jake Casey that was a just speaking to the audience through his web camera and speaking directly to the audience, literally looking them in the eye with these vlogs. And he's basically talking about these people as if they were people in his life or people that he's witnessed. And he became the only real through line trajectory of the film in terms of some concept of something unfolding over time that you could follow at beginning, middle, and end. And then we went even further and embraced text on the screen. So like if a moment was really difficult, literally text would come up on the screen that just said, ugh, and like the H would just extend and keep extending over the frame until it disappeared, or just like a sad face in a sad moment. So we were putting emojis and text speak literally on the screen. And there was a certain point when I was editing that I was like, look, I don't have financiers for this film. I'm not like indebted to anyone. I'm just gonna do whatever I want. I don't care. And so I just started doing ridiculous stuff and typing on the screen and like, so yeah, it transformed into something very different. It would have been a completely different film. And sometimes I think like, man, maybe we should have just embraced that film. It would have been totally different. Who knows? But that's the thing with film. You know, once you like decide that that's your final cut, that's what people see.
Let's talk about your documentary. As much as OMG Ha 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 sort of reflected the spirit of social media, the concept for your documentary really literally had its roots in social media.
Yeah.
Let's talk about This Is What Love in Action Looks Like.
This documentary, This Is What Love in Action Looks Like, took me 6 years to make. I have no interest in making another documentary, I think, ever again, because of how little control you can have on something that's unfolding and when your end might be. I mean, you can choose it at a certain point, but I still think like, man, if I just waited 10 years longer, like so much has changed, it could have been a huge documentary, even bigger. So, you know, what happened is that there was this kid in Memphis, Tennessee, a 16-year-old teenager who told his parents he was gay, and they responded by enrolling him in a program called Love in Action, which was an evangelical-based conversion therapy camp, basically aimed at turning kids who identified as gay straight through religion. And the reason we knew about this is because he went on MySpace. This was in 2005, and we found out the date that he was going to have to start, like his first day at this camp. And so the first day of that protest, we brought our cameras there. And so I was filming everything. You know, he came in, people from the organization came out and talked to us. There was semi-confrontations, nothing too big, but the local news was there. And it was such a success in terms of how many people came out, and people were so driven and felt like it was important for our presence to be there, that we decided to continue every week, every day that week at least. And just to be there with signs that weren't negative or to say this is terrible or shame on you. It was just signs of support that said we love you for who you are, and that this is what love in action looks like, not what's happening in there, but this show of support. And by day 3 of that protest, 2020 was sending me messages on MySpace or LiveJournal saying, can we have an interview with you? We're coming to Memphis. We've heard about this. New York Times is calling. CNN was calling. Good Morning America. I mean, it was insane. It became this huge thing, and it was all based on this kid's MySpace. I mean, and so that we just kept documenting that as until he was let out. It ended up being 8 weeks later. And then I eventually got an interview with the guy who ran the camp, John Smid. But this weird thing happened over time is that I began to meet with him to get his interview, and we would just like go to Starbucks or something and meet and discuss. And he said, no, I won't give you the interview, but I'll gladly meet with you. And then oddly, we became friends over time. And that sort of became a part of the story of the documentary, is that me and him had a weird friendship and respect for one another. Well, he eventually denounced the organization, ended that therapy, and said that therapy in general was harmful. And then he himself came out of the closet as a former homosexual, and now was back to it's very confusing. But so I had a pretty significant, interesting documentary on something that was an international news story. And yeah, that premiered in 2012. The morning of its release, I was on CNN alongside the guy who ran the camp, talking about the experience of that journey. We did an episode on This American Life, which we recorded in this very studio next door. And that got a release and a distribution deal. It's also available on Amazon Prime and out there in the world, and has since, there's a lot of, there's 2 feature films this year that deal with conversion therapy, which is what the documentary was really about.
Well, let's talk about $5 Cover, because I think that was a pivotal moment for you, going from a totally independent filmmaker doing your own thing to working as a professional crew.
Yeah, so it was funny. OMG Ha 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 kind of became a calling card for me. It did earn enough accolades that people started to pay attention for the first time in a different way. And Craig saw that movie and said he was a huge fan of it. And he had just gotten this deal going with MTV to produce this TV/web series called $5 Cover. and he needed an assistant director. And he said, hey, look, I love this film. I want to collaborate with you. Why don't you come on board? You can be an editor, you can be an assistant director, you can be a collaborator. And so from the very get-go, I was helping schedule, giving input on story, and on set every day. And it was the first time, I'll never forget my first day on set of that movie as an assistant director. I'd never been an assistant director before. I didn't even know really what an assistant director does. It's a very, very, very skilled position. And I was very unqualified to be an assistant director. Assistant director is supposed to keep a schedule flowing and moving, but also understand every single part of what it takes to make a film on that level and what every crew member does and what their role is, so that you understand how long it's going to take to get a shot set up and to make your day within a 10-hour, 12-hour window, and just to understand why things may be taking longer or how to help move those things along, as well as you're in charge of safety, et cetera. There's a lot.
You're the main organizer in a sense.
Yeah, and sometimes the voice on set, like when the director is not there, I mean, you represent the director, you're moving things along while they're off set, working with actors, et cetera. Never been doing that before, had no business doing it then, but I'm so thankful for Craig throwing me into that fire. Because, I mean, it literally had never been on set with more than 5 or 6 people max. And then suddenly we had like a 30 to 40 person crew, a huge cast, and I got thrown into it. I'm sure it was very frustrating for a lot of the skilled crew members who did work on it for a little while, but I think by the end of it, I got a hang of it. And that sort of began a new section of my career where I began to AD and produce other filmmakers' work. And even today, I mean, it's partially how I make a living, is that I spend time going all over the country and working on features in this kind of like $500,000 to $5 million range. That's kind of been a niche for me. And I wouldn't have been able to have that capability if it wasn't for working with Craig. And then I spent a few years after $5 Cover really working under him and with him as a collaborator on several different projects. And to me, that was like my true film school moment, was like learning story structure from Craig, learning how to edit in a much different way. I was so used to doing things in my own way, in this very creative, nonlinear, sort of experimental fashion. And Craig has a very different approach to filmmaking. He's a very technical and a very accessible commercial vein of filmmaking with his own Southern, style, of course, gritty style. But yeah, I learned so much during that period, and really got my film degree by, learning through that system.
Now let's talk about Feral, because that was a project with, streaming television. Everybody is watching programs on streaming services now. And again, you were on sort of the top of the wave, just doing what was coming your way with producing an 8-episode series. Tell me a little bit about how that project came into existence.
Yeah, so the distributor that put out my documentary, This Is What Love in Action Looks Like, called me up one day out of the blue and said, look, we're starting a new streaming service. It's going to be its own independent thing. Pitch us 3 ideas. We want to do a story with you. We have like someone from New York and LA doing a story. We need some regional filmmaker, which has always been a thing that I've been able to sort of market myself as a regional Southern filmmaker. That's rarer than you think. And so I pitched them 3 stories, was literally leaving for Ireland for a vacation for 3 weeks the next day. I sent those in, and then while I was in Ireland, they greenlit one of those ideas, but basically said, you have 3 months to turn this around.
Well, let's look at a little clip.
You look distant.
I look distant. Sorry about that.
You're sorry about that. You're at a loss for words.
I'm at a loss for words.
But you're pulling yourself out of it.
But I'm pulling myself out of it. You like that?
I like that. You like my sweaty palms.
I like sweaty palms. You just pinched your lips together. You just pouted your lip.
I just pinched and pouted my lip. And you're aping me now.
I'm aping you now.
You're making fun of me.
I'm making fun of you.
You're laughing.
I'm laughing. You moved closer to me. I moved closer to you.
You look cross-eyed when you look close to me.
I look cross-eyed when I'm this close to you.
Now this is one of the improvised scenes. This is an actor's exercise, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's oddly enough, it's not completely improvised. So what they're doing is literally this acting technique called the Meisner Technique that is based in improvisation. And it's what I use with a lot of my theater and have used in film often, and what I use with all the actors in this film. And it's really an acting technique that's built in repetition. Like literally someone says, you have on a blue shirt, and then you repeat, I have on a blue shirt. And eventually that gets more intense and deeper and emotional, like, I am really upset, you're really upset. And then you start talking about emotions and people cry, and it's really heightened, like if it's done properly. And so we use that with them, and I decided, look, I just want to film this. I'm going to film you all doing a Meisner exercise, but there was moments when I would start giving them lines, because it is all in the moment, and it's difficult because if you're in the moment truthfully and there's cameras all around you, it can be difficult at times. So I started giving them little lines that I would allow them to jump off on. But I just love that technique of acting so much and think it's so good at getting characters on an emotional, truly intense, deep level connected with one another, that I was like, why should we not just put this on film, And you end up seeing later in the series, Billy, who was one of the characters played by Jordan Nichols, who was in that clip. You see him actually working on a film in the series, and he is teaching his characters how to Meisner as a part of that technique. So it's a little bit of like, life imitating art going on, but yeah, those actors also, I just couldn't speak highly enough. Ryan Masson is the other actor in that scene, and they were just so good at just owning it and being so subtle in a way that really felt very intimate.
And I have a clip from something that you are have you finished editing it? Are you still working on it?
I literally am finalizing it tonight. It's a short film called The One You Never Forget. I won an Indy grant from the Indy Memphis Film Festival. They give away 2 grants each year. I wrote a script for that and won that. I'm very grateful for that grant program. It's really excellent. Yeah, it's just a short film. It was an exercise that I wanted to do, one location, very minimal actors. We could shoot it in one day. A friend of mine, a cinematographer, Ashley Connor, came down to Memphis. I mean, she shoots Netflix shows and films for A24, and she came down and shot it. I got some actors who've been on Empire and the Temptations movie, and it really was like an exercise in stepping outside of my comfort level. Spent way more money as well as the grant and some additional funds that we had to raise for a one-day shoot, almost as much as I've spent on entire features before. So that was a little scary. But yeah, this would be the first time that anyone has publicly seen any of the scenes. You'll notice a theme that I think we chose these clips accordingly, that there's these very tight lensing, and it's similar here, and there's something about the way that I like to film intimacy. I think there's 2 ways you can do it. You can do it voyeuristically and sort of step back and feel like that you're hiding and watching people. But I've always been a real fan of being so close that it's almost uncomfortable as a viewer.
Well, let's take a look at this clip from The One You Never Forget.
You remember our first dance?
Mm-hmm.
I'm still mad we didn't get a picture.
Well, your mom...
She did not approve of your bad, and you were very bad. You're trouble.
Okay. Coming from the angel that chose this trouble. You were always sneaking around.
So bad.
I remember what you were wearing.
You remember?
I do.
That pink dress.
The pink dress.
I had the little shoulder poofs and everything, right?
You were beautiful. You see, they weren't today.
Baby, make sure you get a picture of that boy and his date, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Get the picture. Okay. I love you.
I love you.
Have a good day, babe. Mwah. See you later. I love you, Carrie.
You too. I love that even though this film is so polished and so professional, I can still tell it's the same filmmaker who made Blue Citrus Hearts. There's still that camera that's getting too close in people's spaces. Tell me about what your qualities that you really think are essentially you.
I mean, I just really care about capturing gentle, emotional moments that are in an understated way and in a very organic way. You know, I just really like seeing intimacy on film. If it's forced or fake in any way, the film loses me completely. So that's something I've just always really cared about, just finding those really precious small moments in life and putting a microscope over them, you know, and allowing us to really be there in a moment and witness those beautiful moments. And, you know, it's all about finding the right actors who can do that. Really, casting is a huge thing for me. It's like something I can spend forever doing sometimes. And sometimes you can do it right away. If you meet the right person, then you don't need to see anybody else. That's also happened to me. It's like I know instantly. And yeah, I think that, you know, regardless of, I may go on to make movies that are, you know, a genre movie here and there, something like that. That's definitely something I'm entertained and possibilities on the horizon. But I think I'll always be drawn back to these movies that really take these small, beautiful moments and just put a lens on them that is very personal and hopefully organic and believable as an audience. That's what I care about the most.
Have we talked about the fact that you're living in Chicago now?
Yeah, my husband got a job. He's a social worker working at the VA in Chicago, which is incredible work, very important work. And I had this sort of weird attachment to Chicago too, which is not why we moved. It just so happened that that's where he ended up. And so I love Chicago. It's incredible. And so we have an apartment there that we just moved into, and but we still own we have a house here. And so I'm on the Memphis Film Commission board, so I'm here in Memphis for those meetings. I also still work a lot in Memphis, and my family's here. So I would never, no matter where I went, say that I've officially moved away from Memphis, because I don't think that's possible for me. But yeah, I mean, it's it's the first time since I've really been in working with this community that I've had another apartment somewhere else. So it's pretty serious, but as of right now, I'm just trying to come back as much as I can, so I don't really call myself a Chicago resident just yet.
Morgan, it was really great to have this opportunity to have a conversation. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here.